The handcuffs clicked around my wrist just as the HOA president smiled at me like she had finally won. "You're trespassing on private community property," she said. I looked down at the cuffs, then back at her. Her name was Victoria Harlan, and for 3 years she had treated my ranch like an inconvenience that needed to disappear. What she didn't know was that the badge inside my wallet wasn't a fake. And the warrant sitting in my truck wasn't for me. It had her name on it. The deputy tightened the cuffs. Victoria folded her arms. "Take him away." I almost laughed. Not because being arrested was funny, it wasn't, but because Victoria had no idea how badly she had miscalculated. "My name is Daniel Mercer, and I own a 2 to 14-acre ranch outside a small Texas community called Red Creek. The ranch had been in my family for decades. A red barn stood near the western pasture. A gravel road cut through the property toward a line of old wooden fence posts. Beyond that fence were rolling fields where my cattle grazed every morning. It was quiet land, honest land. The kind of place where you could hear coyotes at night and cattle moving through the grass before sunrise. And apparently, according to Victoria Harlan, it was also the perfect place for an HOA to make millions. It started with a letter. I found it taped to my front gate on a Monday morning. Not EO. I read it twice, then a third time. The ER claimed my ranch violated community regulations because my eastern access road allegedly crossed land controlled by the Red Creek Estates Homeowners Association. There was just one problem. Red Creek Estates didn't own that road. They didn't own my fence. And they certainly didn't own my ranch. I called the number printed at the bottom of the letter. Victoria answered. "Daniel," she said pleasantly. That pleasant tone was what bothered me most. "Victoria, I think there's been a mistake." "No mistake. The road you're talking about has been on my deed since before your subdivision existed." She laughed softly. "That's not how property governance works." "Actually, it is." There was silence. Then her voice became colder. "Mr. Mercer, the HOA has legal authority over the surrounding development. Your development." "Correct. Not my ranch." Another pause. "You'll receive further instructions." She hung up. I stood there staring at the phone. I should have known then that this wasn't going to be a simple property dispute. 3 days later, I found orange survey stakes along my eastern fence. Someone had entered my property. I pulled on my boots and walked the fence line. The stakes were fresh, bright orange, every 50 feet. At first I thought they were placed by the county. Then I noticed something carved into one of them. RCE Developmentation for Red Creek Estates, Phase 4. That didn't make sense. Their development was already built. I drove to the HOA office that afternoon. Victoria was sitting behind a glass desk in a perfectly pressed cream blazer. 2 board members sat beside her. Harold Pike, a retired banker with silver hair and a permanent frown, and Melissa Grant, a real estate agent who rarely looked up from her phone. Victoria slid a folder toward me. "You're going to want to review this." I opened it. Inside was a proposed development map. My stomach tightened. The map showed a new row of luxury homes. A clubhouse, a private lake, and a road running directly across the eastern portion of my ranch. I looked up. "You're kidding." "No, this is my property." Victoria smiled. "We're prepared to make you a very generous offer." "How generous?" She named a number. I actually laughed. It was less than 1/5 of what the ranch was worth. "No." Her smile disappeared. "You should think carefully." "I already did." "You may not have a choice." I closed the folder. "That's where you're wrong." I stood up and walked out. For the next 2 weeks things escalated. Surveyors appeared near my fence. Construction trucks started parking along the county road. A drone hovered over my pasture. Then one morning, I found a bulldozer sitting beside my eastern gate. I confronted the operator. "Who hired you?" He pointed toward the road. Victoria's black SUV was parked there. She rolled down her window. "Daniel, get your equipment off my property. This is authorized construction." "By whom?" "The HOA. You don't own this land." Victoria stared at me. "You're making this much harder than it needs to be." I stepped closer. "No. You're making it harder than it needs to be." She lowered her voice. "You're going to regret refusing our offer." That sentence stayed with me, because 2 nights later, somebody cut my fence. I found the damage at sunrise. 4 fence posts were down. The cattle had gotten through. I spent hours getting them back into the pasture. When I returned to the house, there was a second letter waiting. This one was from the county. It claimed I had created a safety hazard by maintaining an unauthorized access road. I called my attorney. His name was Marcus Reed. Marcus had handled property cases for ranch owners across Texas. He listened carefully. Then he said something that changed everything. "Daniel, don't fight this emotionally." "I'm not." "Good. Because someone is building a paper trail." "What kind?" "The kind designed to make you look like the problem." I stared through my kitchen window at the red barn. "What do I do?" "Document everything." So I did. Every photograph, every vehicle, every survey stake, every letter, every license plate I could legally record from my property. And then I noticed something strange. The survey stakes weren't marking the HOA's boundary. They were marking something else. An old property line, one that hadn't appeared on any modern HO map. Marcus came to the ranch the next morning. We walked the eastern boundary together. He stopped at an ancient oak tree. "Look here." A half buried beneath the grass was an old metal survey marker. Marcus crouched down. He brushed away dirt. His expression changed. "Daniel." "What?" "This is older than the HOA." "How much older?" He looked at me. Decades. We took photographs. Marcus called a licensed surveyor named Ethan Cole. Ethan arrived the following afternoon with a GPS surveying system and a stack of county records. He spent 6 hours walking the boundary. Near sunset, he returned to the barn. He didn't look happy. What did you find? Ethan put the equipment down. The OA's map is wrong. I exhaled. I knew it. No, he said. You don't understand. He opened his tablet. They're not just claiming your access road. He zoomed in. They've drawn their proposed development nearly 27 acres inside your actual property boundary. I stared at the screen. 27 acres. My land, my family's land. Someone had deliberately moved a line. Can you prove it? Ethan nodded. With the original county plats, your deed history, and the GPS survey. And Marcus looked at me. That's enough to stop construction. I thought it was. I was wrong. The next morning, 2 police cruisers pulled into my driveway. A deputy stepped out. Behind him came Victoria Harlan. She walked toward my porch holding a folder. Daniel Mercer. You know who I am. She looked at the deputy. He has been repeatedly trespassing on HOA property. I stared at her. What? She held up a document. This is a formal complaint. Marcus had warned me someone might try this. Still, hearing it was surreal. I haven't stepped onto OA property. Victoria smiled. You were photographed inside the community last week. I was at your office. That's HOA property. You invited me there. Her expression hardened. That isn't how the complaint reads. The deputy looked uncomfortable. Mr. Mercer, I need you to come with us. I glanced toward Victoria. She was smiling again. That same little smile. The one she'd worn when she told me I would regret refusing her offer. I raised my hand slowly. Are you arresting me? The deputy hesitated. For trespassing, yes. Victoria stepped closer. Maybe now you'll understand who you're dealing with. The handcuffs came out. I didn't resist. I didn't argue. I simply looked at Victoria and said one sentence. You should really check your paperwork before you celebrate. She laughed. I've checked everything. The deputy cuffed my wrists. Victoria turned toward her SUV. She thought she'd won. But as the cruiser door opened, I looked through the windshield at my own truck sitting near the barn. Inside that truck was a black leather case. Inside that case was my federal credentials, and beneath those credentials was a sealed document I'd been carrying for days. A federal warrant. A warrant connected to an investigation that had nothing to do with a simple HOA dispute. An investigation that had been quietly building around Red Creek Estates. And now, thanks to Victoria Harlan, the woman I had been trying to identify had just put herself directly in front of me. I sat in the back of the cruiser. The door slammed shut. Victoria's SUV disappeared down the driveway. The deputy started the engine. Then my phone rang. Marcus was calling. I couldn't answer because of the cuffs. But I could see his name glowing through the glass. The deputy glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Everything okay? I smiled faintly. No. He frowned. I leaned back against the seat. Everything is about to get very interesting. Because Victoria thought she had just arrested a ranch owner. She hadn't. She had just triggered the next step of a federal investigation, and she had no idea what was waiting for her. The county jail smelled like disinfectant, old coffee, and rain-soaked concrete. I sat on a metal bench with my wrists finally free, staring at the gray floor while a booking officer finished processing my paperwork. The deputy who arrested me stood behind the counter. His name was Deputy Ryan Keller. He was younger than I expected, probably early 30s, with sandy brown hair and tired eyes. He looked at my paperwork again, then at me, then back at the paperwork. Something doesn't add up. I said nothing. He lowered his voice. Your attorney is already here. I figured. He says the trespassing complaint is going to be dismissed. That would be convenient. Ryan hesitated. There's something else. I looked up. What? He slid a document across the counter. Victoria Harlan called this in personally. I looked at the report. Her signature was at the bottom. The allegation said I had entered an HOA, owned maintenance lot without permission. There was even a photograph attached. I recognized the location immediately. It was the parking area outside the OA office. I looked at Ryan. That photograph was taken when I was invited to a meeting. He nodded. That's what your lawyer says. Then why am I here? Ryan didn't answer. He didn't have to. Someone wanted me here. Someone wanted me distracted. Someone wanted the ranch unprotected while something happened there. My instincts kicked in. Deputy, when was this complaint filed? Yesterday afternoon. And when was the warrant issued? Ryan looked confused. There isn't a warrant. I stared at him. Exactly. The room went silent. A trespassing arrest based on a complaint with no judicial warrant, no verified ownership of the alleged property, and a photograph showing me at a location where I had been invited. It was weak, very weak, but that wasn't what bothered me. What bothered me was the timing. Victoria had waited until after Ethan's survey confirmed the HOA was encroaching on my land. Then she had me arrested. Marcus entered the room a few minutes later. He looked furious. Daniel, what's happening? Your charges are being dropped. Good. Not good enough. He put a folder on the table. Someone filed an emergency petition against you this morning. I opened it. The HOA was asking the county to declare my eastern access road an unauthorized private roadway. If granted, they could block access to part of my ranch while their development dispute continued. They're trying to isolate the property, I said. Marcus nodded. And there's more. He pulled out another document. Look at the signature. I did. The document claimed that the HOA had obtained consent from neighboring landowners to expand the development boundary. I recognized 3 names. my neighbors. All three had told me privately they opposed Victoria's plan. These signatures are fake. Marcus leaned closer. I know? Then why are they filing them? Because someone thinks the county won't look closely enough. That was when Ryan walked back into the room. Mr. Mercer. I looked at him. Your vehicle is still at the ranch. Les. There are people there. My stomach tightened. Ooh, construction crews. Marcus immediately stood. Daniel, we need to get back there. We left the station less than 20 minutes later. The drive to the ranch felt longer than usual. When we turned onto the gravel road, I could see dust rising in the distance. My heart sank. There were 3 pickup trucks near the eastern fence, a backhoe, 2 survey vehicles, and Victoria's black SUV. I stepped out before Marcus had fully closed his door. What the hell are they doing? We walked toward the gate. Victoria stood beside a county inspector. She looked at me and froze. You were released. Apparently, she recovered quickly. This area is under review. I pointed toward the equipment. Get them off my property. The county inspector looked uncomfortable. Mr. Mercer, the HOA has submitted documentation indicating they have an easement. A easement. Marcus stepped forward.
Show us.
The inspector handed him a packet. Marcus read it, then laughed once. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. This document is dated 6 years before the subdivision was even incorporated. Victoria crossed her arms. That doesn't make it invalid. Marcus looked at her. It makes it impossible. Her face tightened. I noticed something else. One of the surveyors wasn't looking at the documents. He was looking at me. Then he looked toward Victoria. That tiny exchange told me enough. I walked toward him. Who are you? He swallowed. I'm just doing my job. What's your name? Paul. Paul what? He looked at Victoria. She shook her head almost imperceptibly. Marcus noticed it too. That's interesting, he said. Victoria snapped. You're making assumptions? No, Marcus replied. We're collecting evidence. Then Ethan arrived. He had apparently been following the situation from the county office. He walked straight to the survey markers. After a few minutes, he called us over. Daniel. I joined him. He pointed toward the ground. They moved the markers. What? The original markers were here yesterday. He pointed several feet away. No, they're gone. Ethan pulled up yesterday's GPS data. The old boundary line appeared on his screen. Then he showed us the new marker positions. Someone had moved them. Not by accident, by design. Marcus looked at Victoria. You realize this is becoming much more serious. She stared back. You have no proof. Ethan raised his tablet. We have digital coordinates. Victoria's confidence cracked for the first time. But she wasn't finished. She reached into her folder. I have something you don't. She pulled out a signed agreement. This is from the original developer. Marcus took it. His expression changed. I looked at him. What? He didn't answer immediately. Victoria smiled. The original developer granted the HOA access to the eastern corridor. Marcus finally spoke. This signature? What about it? Victoria asked. It looks familiar. She smiled. It should. It's legitimate. Marcus turned the document around. This is not the developer's signature. Victoria's smile vanished. How would you know? Because I represented him 8 years ago. Silence. The county inspector stepped backward. Victoria looked at the document. Then at Marcus. Then at me. For the first time, she looked scared. But I wasn't satisfied. I wanted to know why. Why would an HOA president risk forging documents? Why were survey markers being moved? Why were construction crews entering my ranch? And why had someone gone so far as to have me arrested? That evening, Marcus and I sat in my kitchen. The rain hammered against the windows. Ethan had already sent us the survey files. We spread everything across the table.
Deeds, maps, county plats,
HOA filings, construction permits, photographs. Then Marcus noticed something. Daniel. He tapped a document. Look at this company. It was the development contractor listed on the HOA's latest filing. Harlan Development Group. I looked at him. Harlan. Marcus nodded. Victoria's family. That changed everything. The OA wasn't simply trying to expand. They were trying to acquire my land at a fraction of its value, rezone it, and develop it. But there was still one question. Why my ranch? Marcus leaned back. Because of the road. What road? He pointed at the old county map. The eastern access road connects directly to the highway. I stared at the map. If they control that road, they control access to their entire proposed development. I understood. My ranch wasn't just land. It was the missing connection in their development plan. And suddenly, the fake documents made sense. The intimidation, the survey crews, the police complaint, the attempted arrest. Everything was designed to force me out before anyone realized what they were doing. But there was something Marcus hadn't told me. He opened another file. This came from a federal contact. I looked at him. What federal contact? He hesitated, then said quietly they've been investigating Harlan Development Group for months. I stared at him. For what? Financial fraud, forged property documents, possible corruption involving public officials. The rain grew louder. Marcus looked directly at me. And Daniel, what? Your ranch isn't the first property they've tried to take? My blood ran cold. How many? We don't know yet. He slid another photograph across the table. It showed an elderly couple standing beside a small farmhouse. The house had been demolished. I looked at the caption. Property acquired through disputed easement claim. Then Marcus said the words I had been waiting for. The federal investigation is moving tomorrow. I looked toward the black leather case sitting near the door. The case I'd carried for days. The case Victoria didn't know existed. Marcus followed my eyes. You're gonna have to show them who you really are. I nodded. But not yet. Why? I looked at the documents spread across the table. Because I want Victoria to keep talking. Marcus smiled. That might be the smartest thing you've said all day. The next morning, I drove to the county courthouse. Victoria was already there. So were the HOA board members. So was her attorney. And sitting at the end of the courtroom was a federal prosecutor I'd never met before. He looked at me, then at Marcus, then at the black leather case in my hand. He gave the smallest nod. I knew the moment had arrived. Victoria stood when I entered. Her expression was confident again. She whispered something to her lawyer. Then she pointed toward me. That man has repeatedly violated HOA property rules and trespassed despite warnings. The judge looked at me. Mr. Mercer. I stood. Yes, Your Honor, Victoria smiled. She thought this hearing was going to decide whether I had broken OA rules. She had no idea the entire room was about to learn whose rules actually mattered. I placed the black leather case on the table, opened it, and took out my federal credentials. The courtroom went completely silent. Victoria's smile disappeared. The judge leaned forward. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I said the words I had been waiting to say. My name is Daniel Mercer. I held up my badge. I am a United States Marshal. Victoria's face went pale. But that wasn't the part that broke her. I reached into the case again, pulled out the sealed federal warrant, and placed it on the table. This, I said quietly, is for Victoria Harlan. Her attorney immediately stood. Your Honor, the prosecutor rose. Let him finish. Victoria stared at me. I looked straight into her eyes. You wanted me arrested for trespassing. I slid the warrant across the table. No, you're going to find out what happens when someone trespasses across the law. For several seconds, nobody moved. Victoria stared at the warrant as if the paper itself had become something dangerous. Her attorney reached for it. The federal prosecutor stopped him. Don't. The attorney slowly pulled his hand back. The judge looked at the prosecutor. Is this legitimate? The prosecutor nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Victoria finally found her voice. This is ridiculous. I haven't done anything. The prosecutor looked at her. That will be determined by the court. She turned toward me. You planned this. I shook my head. No, I looked around the courtroom. You did. Her face twisted with anger. You have been pretending to be a rancher this entire time. I am a rancher. And a federal marshal. Yes. Then why didn't you tell anyone? Because I wasn't investigating you. That stopped her. I continued. I was investigating a different case. Your name kept appearing in places it shouldn't have. The prosecutor stepped forward. Ms. Harlan, you are being investigated for suspected conspiracy, fraudulent property filings, falsification of records, and obstruction of a federal investigation. You are not required to answer questions at this time. Victoria looked at her attorney. He whispered something to her. She shook her head. No, this is a setup. Then Harold Pike, the HOA board member, suddenly stood. I want a lawyer. Melissa Grant stood too. I didn't know anything about this. Victoria turned toward them. Sit down. That was the moment everything started falling apart. The prosecutor placed a second folder on the table. We have financial records. A third folder. Email communications. A fourth. Property transfer documents. And finally, photographs. The same elderly couple Marcus had shown me. The same farmhouse. The same disputed easement. Except now there was something new. A photograph of Victoria standing beside a demolition crew. The courtroom became completely silent. Victoria's attorney closed his eyes. He knew. The case wasn't about one ranch anymore. It was about a pattern. Over the next several weeks, the truth came out piece by piece. The HOA had been used as a vehicle to pressure property owners into selling land below market value. Some owners had received threatening violation notices. Others had discovered mysterious easements appearing in county records. A few had been told their roads would be closed unless they signed agreements. And in several cases, developers connected to Victoria's family had purchased the property shortly afterward. My ranch was supposed to be the biggest acquisition yet. The 27 acres weren't just valuable. They were the key to the entire Phase 4 development. Without my land, their proposed road couldn't connect to the highway. Without that road, their luxury development lost much of its value. So they had tried everything. First, they tried money, then pressure, then intimidation, then forged documents, and finally they tried to use the police against me. But Victoria made one mistake. She believed the badge was the most important thing I had. It wasn't. The evidence was. Months later, I stood inside the same courthouse. This time, I wasn't the defendant. Victoria sat at the other side of the courtroom with her attorney. The judge reviewed the evidence. The forged survey documents had been confirmed. The financial records had been traced. The false easements had been exposed. The construction contracts had been connected to the development company. And several former HOA members had agreed to testify. The case eventually reached a federal court. Victoria's attorney argued that she had been meddled by other people. The prosecutor presented emails showing she had personally approved several of the documents. One message became particularly important. It was sent the night before my arrest. The subject line read, "Get Mercer out tomorrow." Underneath it were instructions about the fake trespassing complaint. The courtroom went silent when the message was displayed. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Because by then, I understood how many people had been hurt by the same scheme. There were families who had sold land because they were scared, farmers who had lost access roads, retired couples who had spent years fighting paperwork they didn't understand. For me, justice wasn't about watching Victoria lose everything. It was about making sure nobody else had to stand where I had stood. Eventually, the county officially recognized my original property boundaries. The 27 acres were restored to my ranch records. The proposed Phase 4 development was canceled. The HOA board was dissolved and replaced. Several county records were corrected, and the road through my ranch remained exactly where it had always been. Mine. One Saturday morning, months after everything ended, I stood beside the red barn watching the sun rise over the pasture. The same wooden fence stretched across the eastern field. The cattle moved slowly through the grass. The gravel road was quiet. For the first time in years, I could hear the ranch again. Not lawyers. Not construction equipment. Not arguments. Just wind. My neighbor Tom Ellis stopped by the gate. He looked toward the pasture. Feels different. It does. He smiled. You finally won. I shook my head. No. He looked at me. I didn't win. I looked toward the barn. Would just stop them from taking what wasn't theirs. That afternoon, I walked to the eastern fence. The original survey marker was still there beneath the old oak tree. I crouched down and brushed away the dirt. The marker hadn't moved. Neither had the truth. I thought about Victoria's face when she first saw my badge. She had believed that was the moment everything changed. But it wasn't. The real turning point happened much earlier. It happened when I refused to sign, when I photographed the fence, when I called my attorney, when Ethan checked the old survey, when neighbors finally decided to speak. The badge hadn't saved my ranch. People telling the truth had. I stood up and looked across the land my family had protected for generations. Then I smiled. Because sometimes the strongest answer isn't shouting, it isn't threatening, and it isn't revenge. Sometimes it's simply standing your ground long enough for the truth to catch up with the people who thought they could bury it. I walked back toward the barn as the sun dropped behind the Texas hills. And for the first time since Victoria Harlan had placed that ridiculous trespassing complaint against me, I felt completely free. She thought she had put me in handcuffs. She never realized she was the one walking into a trap. Because the easiest way to lose everything is to mistake someone's silence for weakness.